How do you start a consulting business if you don't have any experience? It's an interesting question because there's a lot of people online telling you exactly how you should do it. They'll tell you how to choose a niche, how to price your services, how to build a website, network, how to start finding clients. Well, some of that advice is excellent. Some of it I completely disagree with, and there are several critical pieces that none of them talk about. So in this episode, we're going to talk about what experience you actually need before you should start consulting, how to build credibility if you've never had a paying client, how to develop the right offer, how to price your services, and what you should focus on first if your goal is to build a consulting business that generates clients consistently. We'll also explore the difference between becoming a consultant and becoming the kind of expert people naturally want to hire, because those aren't the same thing. By the end of this episode, you'll have a much more clear roadmap for how to go from little or no consulting experience to building the foundation of a successful consulting business. Let's dive right in. Now, in preparing for this episode, I have a lot of advice that I could just share, but I thought I was going to do a little digging, and I found the top ranking videos on YouTube on this topic, and I analyzed the advice that's shared, and I've broken this episode into 4 different areas. The first area that we're going to discuss is areas where they and I agree. So I'll list those things kind of quickly because you might have already watched one of their episodes, and I'm going to agree with several things. Then I'm going to list off things that I still think are good advice, but you're never going to hear me talking about them. And then I'll spend some time talking about the advice where they give one opinion and my opinion is different, and I think critically so. And then the last category is things that they just don't even think to talk about that I think are critical. Like if you miss these things, you will not succeed as a consultant. So let's start with the first section. A common piece of advice is for you to pick a specific niche or area of expertise. I highly agree. I talk about it all the time. I think I go even way more specific than most they do, but yeah, I fully agree with that. They also talk about understanding your target market before offering your services. So I fully agree with that. The challenge is they don't typically show you how to do that. Like, how do you understand your target market? How do you research that? What tools can you use? What are you looking for? I think a lot of those things are missing, and they are pretty important. So if they say it's important for you to understand your target market, I say absolutely. They also talk about how you need to solve real problems, not imagined ones. I've never heard that phrasing before, but it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I usually talk about the outcome, like focus on overcoming a problem to get to the solution, right? Instead of just offering hourly services, or yeah, we're going to work hard on this. Let's discuss it today. I'm going to provide you coaching, and we'll just come back each week and we'll make progress, okay? Or what is the outcome that you're wanting? What does that finish line look like? And are you making progress to get there? Another point that I agree with is that experience matters. Yeah, you can't just have all the knowledge. You've got to have been in the trenches and had experience helping people. They also talk about building credibility before expecting premium clients. Well, yeah, like if you actually haven't helped other people succeed, I often recommend that you give away your service for free, or maybe in partnership, so that you can prove your methodology, or so that you can show that you can deliver results. Because if somebody's going to pay you a premium, that's what they're paying for. They're not paying for your time. They're not paying for you to learn. They're paying for that end result. And so you have to have a track record of delivering that result. They talk about developing a clear offer. And I agree with that. Develop a clear offer. I guess I won't spend any more time on that. Deliver measurable value. Yeah, I mean, that's the outcome I'm talking about. They say that relationships and networking are important. So I really agree. I think we're talking about different things, though. I think they're talking about like network on social media, go to events, build relationships there. So I'm not saying that's not valuable. I'm not saying that's not going to be helpful, but I know how to build relationships on autopilot, and I know how to market in a way that doesn't interrupt people. So that's the way that I think about it. Because I often talk about build a relationship first before they see your promotional material. So yeah, I fully agree that relationships are important. Networking, like the hustle isn't always important. Hustle in the beginning, but eventually you don't have to hustle so much. Okay, 2 more points that I agree with is that you should continually improve your services. Yeah, I mean, over time, as you get more efficient, as you learn what works and doesn't work, you can try different things, you can experiment, you can use new tools. So yeah, I agree. Continually improve. I mean, is anyone going to disagree with that? So the last one that they share is that marketing should educate rather than simply sell. And I was surprised. I fully agree with that. But that's not what I hear marketers teach. So I'm so glad that fellow YouTubers who are teaching you how to grow your consulting business are teaching this, because that's the real difference. If you pay to push an ad in front of people, they put up their defenses, right? They're skeptical now. Now they're annoyed. Versus if you educate people first, you can help build a relationship of trust before they see your promotional material. So I fully agree with that. Okay, so now there's a whole list of things that I do think is good advice, but I just don't have a lot to say about it. I'm not going to spend my time talking about it on this channel. So they talk about creating an ascension ladder or a product ladder. Yeah, go for it. Do that. They talk about choosing them on different pricing models, whether hourly or project or retainer or value-based. I mean, I guess I do have an opinion on that. The more you can transition to delivering the outcome and price on results is going to be way better than hourly. They talk about reviewing your pricing annually. That's probably a good idea. It's not anything I've ever done. They talk about getting set up with your bookkeeping, your contracts, your insurance, your taxes. Well, yeah, you just work with an accountant. Make sure that you do everything correctly, that you're keeping good records. They talk about creating repeatable systems and SOPs, standard operating procedures. Absolutely. Like in the very beginning, like you can kind of wing it, but you do want to start remembering what you're doing and creating systems so that you can hire and you can grow and you can be more efficient. They give advice to use AI to speed up administrative work. I use AI all the time. I don't know exactly what they mean by administrative work, but yeah, AI is a great tool. They talk about using a CRM for outreach. A CRM is important. It's great for nurturing your existing email list and to segment and to automate. You know, down the road, that's going to be more and more valuable. Now, they mentioned something about downloading your LinkedIn contacts and reconnecting. I don't even know what that means. How do you download that? I don't know. Maybe I'm not going to talk about that. They talk about setting aside a dedicated CEO time for annual planning. Okay, I've never done that, but I'm sure it's really good. Planning is always good. They talk about separating business and personal finances. Yeah, hopefully that's obvious, because your business expenses are write-offs. You don't have to pay taxes on the expenses of your business, but you've got to separate it very clearly from your personal expenses, and your accountant can help you with that. Another one I thought was interesting, and I agree with, having a financial runway before leaving employment. So I guess that means if you're starting your consulting business while you're still being employed for another company, like make sure that you've got some savings, make sure you've got a little bit of security before you leave that security. Like, yeah, I do recommend that, although I quit my job because I wasn't making enough in my employment. I was doing telemarketing, and in part of that job, I was making $8 an hour plus commission, and that was actually pretty good. I made a lot of good commissions. But then they started recycling their leads, and my income went down. I was getting behind on bills, and I quit my job and started my business. It was a risk, but it was successful. One more piece of advice that I agree with is they say build a simple but professional website and a business email early. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be critical. You do want to look professional. Don't spend a lot of money there. Okay, so now let's get into some of the areas where my advice differs and can differ very significantly. So one, you're going to hear a lot of emphasis on certifications or degrees. I disagree with that. I'm not saying a certification or a degree is not important, because I think education is huge, but you don't need the degree. Now, I have a bachelor's degree, but it's in a complete different area than where I consult. And you might have heard me talk on different episodes about the 3 different levels of expertise. A degree is at a level 1 expertise, and you're not going to consult there. So you need education, but above that, you need experience. And above that, not just having experience yourself, you need to have experience in helping other people succeed in order for you to be a consultant. And the way that other people talk about the importance of these certifications or these degrees makes you think that once you get the degree, you're set to go. You're good to go to consult. If you really think about it logically, being able to get a result is far more important than any credentials. Now, another thing that they recommend is competitor pricing. And I admit, I don't really care what my competitors are charging because I'm not doing hourly things or I'm not trying to compete on price. I know what outcome I can deliver and I know the value of that. And so I've got to create the most efficient system to get there so that I've got profit margins in place so that it's a profitable thing for me and the outcome that I deliver makes the cost well worth it. Some other advice that you're going to hear heavily is how important it is to network and do outbound outreach like cold DMs and stuff like that. And if you found something that's working for you and generating leads, you don't need to cut ties with it immediately, but I would much rather help you become the thought leader in your industry, to help you own your category so that people are finding you and so you can start having more leads than you can handle instead of having to do all this grunt work of networking and outbound outreach. So they do talk about choosing a niche, but I go much deeper. I define a branch, and with my tree analogy, you have the trunk, which is your industry, then all the different categories or all the different branches or the categories in your industry, and the leaves represent the questions. And so I go very specifically looking at every little branch on this tree and looking at who are the people asking these questions. How likely are they to hire me for my services? How close of a match is it with my expertise? And just compare all those branches until you can narrow it down to the ones that are more and more valuable, ultimately until you find the one that's the most valuable to you right now. Focus on dominating that. You can own it within a few months. Now, a lot of the other videos that you'll watch, they talk about asking your prospects what they need, and right, looking in the comments of your videos and thinking that that's going to help you determine what content to create. Well, it might help in the way of a topic brainstorm, but you need to actually dig deeper. You need to find what questions are consistently asking online. Like when they go to Google, what are they typing in? And what questions have consistent search volume? Because if you do that, you can make sure that when you create a piece of content like a YouTube video, that it has a built-in audience. So it's not just a one-off random question that no one else is using that same wording, because it's not going to have a built-in audience. But if you can find topics that are consistently getting asked every single month, they were asked years ago, they're going to be asked in the future, then you can create a piece of content that will continually be generating views and leads for your business. Other experts are going to really emphasize what they call marketing assets as business cards, your CRM, your LinkedIn, your website. Like, yeah, I agree that your website is a marketing tool. Don't worry about business cards. Your CRM is important, but that's for nurturing and segmentation. LinkedIn is a great nurturing platform. I wouldn't consider it marketing. The only way that you can use social media for marketing is if you do paid ads, and that's your last resort because you're really annoying people. You're interrupting them. They put up their defenses, and so you're creating more problems that you have to solve before you can have a good, trusting conversation. So I think they're really missing the mark on marketing and really owning a category, because the people that need you the most that are online searching, those are the people that you want to find you. Right? Those are the people that you want to consume your content. So the last category that I group things into is things that they're just completely overlooked. They don't even know it's an option. So I don't think that they realize that there are 3 different levels of expertise. You know, if you have all the knowledge, somehow that's the same as somebody who's been in the trenches helping people. But even more than that there are 3 parts to personal branding. There's your thought leader image, there's your thought leader messaging, there's your thought leader positioning, and that's kind of what I've been talking about. Well, when they think about personal branding, they just think about your thought leader image, and they don't realize that there's 2 other parts. Some people recognize number 2, that your messaging is really, really important, but they don't do anything about the positioning side. And my last 2 points I've kind of already mentioned, but I'll just mention them in this category, that building a relationship before promotion is something that I rarely see. It's super critical, and also it's very important to understand the difference between marketing and nurturing. And I've got lots of other episodes on this channel that I think you would value in learning about the difference between marketing and nurturing. So specifically right now, if you've watched this far, then you're serious about growing your consulting business. There's one episode that you've got to watch next. Okay, it's right here. It's What is Thought Leadership? Now in that video, you'll learn what separates expertise from thought leadership, and you'll see examples of what it actually means to own a category and how you can become the recognized go-to authority in your space that your dream clients find first. So I'm going to link to that episode right there. That's the next one that you should watch. I'll see you there.